Fighting against injustice across Connecticut, Melissa in the Morning checks in with the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. Now on WICC 600 AM and 107.3 FM.
Welcoming back to the show, Kim Jacobsen with the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. Hey, Kim, how are you?
Good morning, Melissa. How are you?
I can't complain. Thank you so much for asking. I'm curious, Kim, what are invisible disabilities? Because I know we're tackling that today.
Sure. So if you have a disability that is not apparent but impacts your life in some way, then you have an invisible disability. So we're talking about things like autism, traumatic brain injury, mental health disabilities, ADHD, Crohn's, colitis, endometriosis, epilepsy, fibromyalgia, lupus, chronic fatigue syndrome, or even things like heart disease or diabetes. And it is estimated that 10% of the people living in our country have some type of invisible disability. Mm-hmm. And perhaps even 96% of all disabilities are invisible. They're also called non-apparent disabilities or hidden disabilities. And I think it's really important to talk about these disabilities in the framework of talking about all disabilities. Because when you see a person in a wheelchair, you know that they are disabled. You know what to expect. As a matter of fact, oftentimes the wheelchair is the universal sign for disabilities. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty easy for people to understand the challenges that someone in a wheelchair might face and support those challenges. They may need a ramp. They may need larger doorways. They may need grab bars. But if you have an invisible disability, people might not be able to know what kind of challenges you're facing or spot the challenges, or they may be skeptical that you even have a disability or may find it hard to help you.
Preach, girl. Oh, my Lord. I'm just so glad that you're tackling this topic. This is something that is so near and dear to our hearts because I know I've told you, my audience certainly knows, my younger brother with autism, very, very high functioning. You would never know if you met my brother that he is autistic and what he's gone through. Used to be nonverbal, was told he would never drive a car, would never get a degree, yet all these things, and yet he has broken every barrier possible. But my God, growing up here in Connecticut, Kim, it was less than ideal, to put it nicely. The fact is he looked normal. I'm going to put it bluntly. He looked like there was nothing wrong with him. And when he opened his mouth, he didn't even really sound like there was anything wrong with him. So he was more inclined to be bullied horrifically. He was excused of getting probably more services than he could have. And yet, in the moments where you could be like, hey, we believe in you, he was knocked down so tremendously by his school district. It was deplorable. That's why he doesn't live here. He hasn't lived here for 10 years. He moved out of state because he felt he needed to be somewhere where he could be his own person and where his identity wouldn't be defined by what the school had said he basically was. But you are just speaking so many truths right now to, not just autism, but to so many, as you mentioned, invisible disabilities. And I'm curious, Kim, with what you just mentioned, like the idea of not noticing or not recognizing that maybe there's something that is going on with that person. What does that mean when you graduate college, for example, in the workplace? Like you said, if you have a wheelchair, you're going to get ramps, right? If you're in the workplace, though, and you're saying, hey, because I'm dyslexic, I may need, things done for me audibly or, I don't know. I'm making up in a scenario. Do you find that there are workplaces, even in 2023 here in Connecticut, that are like, nope, we don't believe you, or nope, you got to prove that in order for us to accommodate you?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry for what your brother had to go through. And it's unfortunately somewhat of a common story. Because people with disabilities who have invisible disabilities are often treated with skepticism. Mm-hmm. Well, you look fine. Why would you need something? Why do you need extra help? And there's a lot of even reluctancy to disclose disabilities, right? Because disability is a loaded word. Mm-hmm. People often feel embarrassed or ashamed. There's a lot of stigma and assumptions that go with people being disabled. People may assume that a disabled person isn't able to work, mm-hmm. can't raise a family, or lead a productive or fulfilling life. And then some people just don't want to be pitied or viewed as helpless, so they're more reluctant to disclose a disability to an employer, to a housing provider, or any really place that they may need a little bit of assistance. But what the law says is that you can ask for an accommodation in employment and housing, even in places where you go around in the public, such as the school. And that is something that the CHRO focuses on, not only educating people about their rights to ask for accommodation, but in the cases where the entity that you ask for the accommodation fails and doesn't accommodate you or is unwilling to accommodate you, you can file a complaint with the commission, and we'll look into it and investigate that.
I am curious, we're talking to Kim Jacobsen about invisible disabilities. Do you suggest, Kim, when you are applying for a job, because I've noticed more and more of them will ask if you live with a disability, do you suggest mentioning that you have one, or do you suggest saying no and hopefully landing the interview and then talking about it? Like, which is the better scenario here? Being judged before you get offered the follow-up interview, or going to the interview and saying, hey, you know, I have to be honest, this has been a problem for me in the past. When I say I have a disability, I am denied getting potential jobs, but now that employer may look at you as a liar. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a fun situation, but what do you suggest to people?
So what I can say, that's a very personal decision, and, you know, there's risks either way. If you need an accommodation and you don't disclose right up front, then you're going to eventually have to let the employer know that you need an accommodation. But some people, because of fear of stigma or they just aren't interested, they won't disclose right away. And even if you have a disability, that doesn't necessarily mean you need an accommodation in the workplace. Say you're diabetic. You might not need anything different in the workplace right now. Maybe in the future you might need something, and you don't have to legally disclose unless you're asking for something. So you can have whatever disability you want, and it's only someone's business if you make it their business up and until you want something.
I see.
But the thing that I would caution people is, if they're having problems at work, it's probably not the best idea to wait until something goes wrong before you then ask for an accommodation. It's not too late, but it doesn't really set you up for success in asking for that accommodation. So if you get a job and then you need an accommodation to succeed in that job, you don't want to let yourself fail and then ask for the accommodation if at all possible.
That's a good point. And Kim, I think this is such an important topic. If people want to learn more, what is the website for the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities?
Sure. I would say to go to www.ct.gov/CHRO, or you can call us the old-fashioned way, 860-541-3400, and we'd be happy to talk out the issues with folks.
Thank you so much, Kim Jacobsen. Always appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And we'll talk again soon. Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, Kim here, talking about invisible